Thank you all for coming to the November meeting of the Warren County Board of Supervisors. Please rise while Supervisor Dickinson leads us in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read the roll.
Mr. Leggett?
Here.
Mr. Diamond?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Ms. Bramer?
Here.
Mr. Lowe?
Here.
Mr. Driscoll?
Here.
Mrs. Frazier?
Here.
Mr. Simpson?
Here.
Ms. Hogan?
Here.
Mr. Dickinson?
Here.
Mr. Merlino?
Here.
Mr. Stroud?
Here.
Mr. Weil?
Here.
Mr. Beatty?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Mr. Sokol?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Hyde?
Here.
Mr. Garrity?
Here.
Chairman Conover?
You should all have received the minutes of our October 18th board meeting. Chair will entertain a motion regarding the minutes. Moved by Supervisor Bramer, second by Supervisor Driscoll. Any comments? There being none, all those in favor of approving the October 18th minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Chris for Employee of the Month. Chris, the floor is all yours.
All right. Come on up here, Chris. Thank you so much for honoring Chris with this. He's a really fine young man. He works over at DSS, of course, in our HEAP unit. HEAP has just started, so he's been quite busy lately. I'll keep this somewhat brief because, he's got to get back to work, and so do I. Anyways, I'll read a couple things here that his supervisors said about him in the last year. Chris is a pleasure to work with. In his rather short time as an examiner, he has great knowledge and experience already in SNAP, TA, and HEAP. He can multitask in each area as well. Another supervisor said, Chris often helps fellow employees and coworkers and represents the agency in a very professional manner. He supports the mission of the agency. I'd like to add that he's a very professional and polite young man. Works hard, he's caring, he's empathetic. He's also very technically adept. He helps out whenever there's some sort of thing going on with someone's computer. Sometimes we don't even have to call IT because Chris is like right there. So it's a really nice thing. He's worked with us since 2014 when he started as a temp. He became permanent in 2016, and this past year he was permanently appointed to be the HEAP social welfare examiner. One last thing I would like to say is that he often gets accolades from the community as well. We've had several phone calls, and I actually got a letter this past year from a client, which is quite short, so I'll read that in closing. This was a letter addressed to his direct supervisor, Mary Klaber. Wanted to give a short letter thanking Chris Connell for representing and responding to my emergency oil needs and broken furnace. He returned all my calls within 24 hours, most the same day. I found it easy to reach him even before voicemails. He was very sympathetic and explained clearly everything to process the paperwork. He is the best employee in the front and an employee that deserves praise. He was extremely friendly and professional as well. I highly recommend him for the Most Valued Employee Award, if there is one. I guess that's as good as we can say it. So thank you, Chris, and thank you all for recognizing him.
Wait, you got a photograph coming here.
I'm very honored to receive this. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without a lot of support from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to declare a public hearing open to consider amending and extending the option agreement with the Economic Development Corporation. Ask the clerk to read the notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Warren, New York is considering an amendment and extension of an option agreement between Economic Development, Warren County, and Warren County. For notice is further given that pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Board of Supervisors on November 1st, 2019, a public hearing will be held by the Board of Supervisors at the Supervisors Rooms in the Warren County Municipal Center, 1340 State Route 9, Queensbury, New York, on November 15th, 2019, at 10 a.m., at which time and place all persons interested in the matter of such amendment and extension of the option agreement will be heard concerning same. A copy of the amended option agreement is available for inspection during regular business hours by contacting the clerk of the Board of Supervisors at the above stated address and may be viewed on the Warren County website.
At this time, I would open the microphone up to anyone wishing to address the board regarding this option agreement. Mr. Whitehead?
Travis Whitehead. I'm looking at Resolution 459, which you're going to be asked to vote on later on today. And I'm wondering if anyone's actually read it, because in extending a option agreement, there's usually several things in an option agreement that seem to be missing in this one. And I'm wondering whether any of you would consider an option agreement on land that you might own under these circumstances, as opposed to land owned by the taxpayers. One of the things missing is a fee for the option. You are giving up the right to sell this land for several years. You've given up that right for almost 20 years already, and the option has never been exercised for these 4 lots. It could be exercised today if EDC wanted to, but they have not. And you're going to give them another 2 years that you cannot deal with this property. You cannot sell it, etc. The price, it would seem like an awful big item in an option. There is no price here. Would anybody in this room go ahead and offer to sell a piece of their property for an undetermined price? I hope not, and I hope that you'll think twice before agreeing to this agreement too. In the past, you have offered the land at $1,600 an acre. This is a price that was established back in 2001, and it had to do with the acquisition price of the parcel back then, and before it was improved with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of roads, sewer, power and light. Over the years, the assessed value of this land has gone up 10, 20, 30 times what it was originally purchased at tax auction back in the late 90s. The county has paid taxes on all these parcels for many years. You are offering today, if they wanted to, on just the first parcel, for example, it's listed there, the EDC could purchase it for $14,480 under the terms of the existing option. It's assessed for about $200,000. It's more than 10 times the price that it's being offered for, and yet over all of these years, the EDC has never seen fit to purchase it. I don't know why you would think over the next 2 years they might think that it's a good thing to purchase. You might be asking at this point in time, though, Travis, I mean, what else can we do with it? I mean, we're told that it has problems. There's wetlands, a lot of rock on the area. Maybe that should have been thought of before all those hundreds of thousands of dollars, roads, sewer, water was put in there. The street, that subdivision, was named Stone Quarry Road. Might have been a good indication that there was stone there, not only 20 years ago, but probably 2,000 years ago, and is a concern today for anyone purchasing it. But today, you continue to pay taxes, have paid taxes. Again, getting back to that first parcel, that, your treasurer went ahead and said that just on that first parcel, which again could be purchased today for $14,000, the county over the last 10 or 12 years has paid $68,000 in taxes to other municipalities and school districts. It happens to be the Hudson Falls School District. That's just on one parcel. And there's 4 parcels here listed, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you've been paying. So again, you might ask, well, Travis, it sounds like a good thing if we can get rid of it. Well, you know what? Maybe it is a good thing to get rid of it, but extending an option that has not been taken up over 15 years is probably not the best way to get that accomplished. Over the last 15 years, only 3 parcels out of this whole subdivision were ever purchased by EDC, and not a single one has been sold. Not one has been sold to another party for economic development. There was a point where a couple of the lots were sold and then returned. This was Hacker Boat. Hacker Boat looked at it. They said, you know what? These parcels have problems. There's rocks on them. There's, you know, there's wetlands. There's issues, and they backed out. Now we, the county, own land abutting this, which has been attached to the airport. You paid over $10,000 an acre for that land. It also has problems, wetlands, etc. Yet, your new airport manager and your new DPW chief are looking at the possibility of leasing that land out to for solar, and we could get a return on that. I don't know why the same thing could not be done on this land, for instance. In fact, when you listen to what Mr. Hajos has said about the people that have contacted him about solar, their main interest is how close am I to the power lines? How close am I to the substation? Well, the substation happens to be located on these parcels. The transmission line runs through several of these parcels. There is no better location for a large solar field than this particular location. So I think over the next 2 years, rather than giving it up to somebody that may do nothing with it, perhaps you ought to give it up to Mr. DeGraw to help market that. You could put it for public use at that point, which is the way the other lands that you purchased for over $10,000 an acre is under that title, and because of it, you pay no taxes on it. So you could remove the taxes. You could maybe use it as income for the airport. We still lose about $500,000 a year on the airport. Same kind of money we're losing on Westmount, just serving fewer people. And I think it would be good to go ahead and decrease that loss. I believe that leasing this land to a solar company could provide that. And, you know, these are the kind of things that you ought to look at. So when you're asked to vote on this in a few minutes, I would ask that you first read it. And then I would also ask for you to wonder whether or not there might be a better use or a better thing that you can do than just kick this can down the road for another 2 years. I believe the opportunities are there. And, you know, if you think that the Siemens deal was bad, this one is worse. And I know many of you say, well, you know, I was never around for the Siemens deal. Many of you weren't. You're all here today. This is a miserable deal, and you should think twice before you vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in a second. Anyone else from the audience wishing to address the board?
Good morning. My name is Ed Bartholomew, President and CEO of Economic Development Corporation of Warren County. And thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for conducting this public hearing this morning. Number one, I'm glad that Mr. Whitehead has changed his opinion on the Queensbury Business Park in allowing solar. He spoke 3 or 4 years ago relative to that same issue and said that the best use was creation of more jobs and more buildings and not solar. Do you remember that, Travis?
No, Travis, no. Please. No, there'll be no response. Please make your issue, but don't personalize. And try to leave people out of it,
Okay.
and leave names out
I
of
just
it.
want to say that what we're attempting to do, the best and possible use of that property, is examination of these 4 parcels, which do have wetlands, which do have some soil issues involved with quarry issues. So we are out right now with Chase and Company that is undertaking an analysis of the wetlands, working with DEC to reflag these particular areas, as well as conducting geotechnical on the site to determine the extent of that. Should that have been done back when they acquired that back in 1995, 96? Probably they should have. However, I was not here. Board of Supervisors have changed, and we need to look forward to this. This extension is essentially about an 18-month extension, and we propose going forward here that we would promote these, market these properties, and at the closing, we would share the net proceeds from the sale of these lots with Warren County at a 50-50 range. On page 3 of this, it is outlined specifically as to the extent of what those closing costs, what these other costs would be. I think going forward, EDC of Warren County is committed to look at this property. The property does have developmental constraints on it. There's no question about it. This property was acquired back in the late 90s through a tax sale from Warren County. And over the years, there have been efforts to bring in industry into that particular area. The forecasting has changed somewhat, and more of our business activities and actions are looking for rehabilitation of buildings due to the high cost of construction. So it may be conceivable at some point solar might be a option. Also, other uses may be available on that piece of property. So we're here to explore those particular areas. And after the reports that will be due early next year, we'll make a decision one way or the other and inform Warren County if we're going to exercise that option. I don't expect that this is going to take 18 months for that to occur. And we'll either go forward or have our option back is to have the county retain ownership of that particular property. But we appreciate the opportunity to go forward with these 4 acres, which would help the first 4 acres, which EDC owns and has been paying taxes about $16,000 a year on currently now. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? Travis, I'm going to give you an opportunity, but please make it brief, and please do not personalize, and please speak to the chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just like to say that Ed is correct, that when Hacker looked at this and suggested that they would have 60 jobs brought to the area, and then a year or two later said, now we changed our mind, we want to put in a solar field instead. I objected to that. I objected because they purchased the land based on 60 jobs, and they bought it at a very low price. So that was my concern at that point in time. Since then, it has become known, better known, that there are issues with that land, and perhaps solar might be a good use for it if nobody else can use it for that.
Thank you, Travis.
Yes. The other thing, though, is that to get a 50% split on the profits when your costs are not even considered is something that you ought to question. Second of all, if a realtor came to you and said, I'll take a 50% commission, you'd laugh them right out of here. Now, maybe you ought to, if you want to get rid of this thing and not be tied to this for 2 years, is to talk to a commercial realtor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome. Always speak to the chair. Always speak to the issue. Never personalize or attack, ever. If you wanted to know the basis for that, you can check Robert's Rules of Order. Thank you. Ryan.
If I could just clarify, Mr. Whitehead mentioned resolution, I think was it 459?
472.
472. Yeah, it is resolution 472. We've already voted on resolution 459. That was the resolution to set this public hearing.
in terms of this being compared to Siemens or a real estate company, this is not a third-party transaction in that same respect. EDC is Warren County's economic development arm. They're our partner. They exist in order to do economic development for us. Number three, this is not a 2-year deal. It's an 18-month extension. This is also not giving EDC anything. The purchase price is still in existence. And I do urge you to read the resolution, because the resolved paragraph says that this is an amendment to the existing contract. The existing contract provisions that are not addressed in this amendment are still in effect. I would urge you all to read that, including those who would speak to you about these resolutions.
All right, let's continue. Public hearing, anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? There being no one, I will close the public hearing. Thank you, everyone. I'll now open the public hearing regarding the Warren County Sewer District assessment roll. Clerk will please read the notice.
The Warren County Sewer District Industrial Park has completed its annual assessment of the cost of the increase and improvement of facilities apportioned to the Warren County Sewer District by reason of the intermunicipal agreement for South Queensbury Avenue Sanitary Sewer District. A benefit to tax roll for 2020 has been completed, showing the annual assessment of the lots and parcels of land in the Warren County Sewer District in proportion to the benefit with each lot or parcel will derive therefrom. The assessment roll describes each lot or parcel of land in such a manner that it may be ascertained and identified, and shows the name or names of the reputed owner or owners thereof, together with the aggregate amount of the assessment levied upon each lot or parcel of land. A copy of the assessment roll is available for inspection during regular business hours by contacting the clerk of the Board of Supervisors at the below stated address, and may be viewed on the Warren County website. Pursuant to Resolution Number 453 of 2019, adopted by the Board of Supervisors, a public hearing will be held by the Warren County Board of Supervisors at the Board of Supervisors Meeting Room in the Warren County Municipal Center, 1340 State Route 9, Queensbury, New York, on the 15th day of November 2019 at 10 a.m., at which time and place said Board of Supervisors will hear and consider any objections that may be made to the assessment roll.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding this matter? There being no one, I'll close the public hearing. I'll now declare open the public hearing on the 2020 tentative Warren County budget, and request the clerk to read the notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Board Budget Officer of the Warren County of Warren has prepared and filed a proposed budget for the fiscal year 2020, and that the Board of Supervisors will meet in the Supervisors Room at the Warren County Municipal Center on the 15th day of November 2019 at 10 a.m. for the purpose of holding a public hearing on the tentative budget of the County of Warren for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020, and that at such hearing any person may be heard in favor of or against the tentative budget as compiled, or for or against any items contained therein. Copies of said tentative budget are available at the office of the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors in the Warren County Municipal Center, where they may be inspected or procured by any interested person during regular business hours, and may be viewed on the Warren County website. Pursuant to Section 359 of County Law, the maximum salaries that may be fixed and payable during the fiscal year 2020 to members of the Board of Supervisors and to the chairman thereof are hereby specified as follows. Members of the Board of Supervisors, $18,267 each. Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, $22,654. Further notice is hereby given that the following is a summary of the tentative budget of Warren County for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020. Gross appropriations of $161,009,910, less the amount of $115,652,207, which is comprised of estimated revenues excluding sales tax credit and appropriated surplus, leaving a balance of $45,357,703 to be raised by taxation.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding the 2020 Warren County budget? Yes, sir.
Morning.
If you could state your name, please, and address.
John Carney, resident of the town of Lake George. I feel a little bit like Don Quixote, tilting at windmills when I come here to talk about inequities of taxation. I do oppose the budget. I would ask you to revisit it. According to the resolution that I read, the town of Lake George is going to get hit with a 3.8% tax increase. I believe that's correct number, according to the paper. That sound right?
Sounds
Actually, let's go with it anyway. That's over twice the rate of inflation. I also realize that over the years, this particular body, and I don't mean anybody individual, over the many years. They look at the town of Lake George as a cash cow because everybody that lives in the town of Lake George is a multimillionaire. Well, I'm here to tell you it ain't so. There are some very well-to-do people that have property up in Lake George, but there's a whole lot of us that are not. We're just average people. We got there through various means. Some of us a lifetime of hard work, myself. Some of us through inheritance. You see a lot of for sale signs going up. It's a problem. Taxation is a problem. And it's based on, everywhere, it's based on assessment. All right? Assessor comes in and says, okay, your property's worth $1 million, it's worth $2 million. Great. Only if you sell it. When you're living there, it isn't worth that. It isn't worth anything. It's an expense. It only becomes worth something if it is put on the market and sold. Maybe that's when the taxation should occur, at the time, based on profit, based on increase in inflation, whatever it happens to be. I have a copy of my tax bill, which anybody can look up. I know there's a particular gentleman here that I showed it to. He thought I was crazy until he looked it up. Hello, Peter. The total bill for the year back in January was $98.63. This is two of us on senior citizens living on Social Security in an average house. Nothing special about our house at all. If you looked at it and say, it's a house, stick house, no marble, no gold fixtures, okay, none of the stuff. $9,863.71. The county portion of that bill, the Warren County portion, is $5,756.68. That's 58% of my total tax bill is Warren County. And what do I get for it? Law enforcement, okay? Law enforcement is universal throughout the county. Everybody has to pay for that, I get it. Social services, not where I am. Don't collect a dime on social services. Highways and roads, I never see a county vehicle where I am. I see state and I see the town of Lake George. So take out law enforcement for almost 58. With this tax increase, that's going to go up over $6,000 a year, strictly to Warren County. Now, I realize I am not going to change the assessment way of taxation here today. It's not going to happen. It's been ingrained for long, and there'll be lots of arguments over the values that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I agree. There are times when it's all right, and there are times when it's not. But as far as I'm concerned, all taxation should be based on your ability to pay, your income, and that changes. And when you get to be a senior citizen, it changes a lot. So here's something to think about. And as I said, I'm not going to waste your time because I'm not going to talk you out of the nonsense here. We all know that this body, and I don't mean individual people, because some of you have not been here, some of you have, over the years has made some incredibly questionable and lousy decisions when it comes to financial. Absolutely horrible. Mr. Beatty's article in the paper the other day I read, he brought up the issue of trust. He's absolutely right. I can't think of any taxpayers that I know, and I know a lot of people in Lake George, I'm part of the fire department. They don't trust you. They look at the past, they look at the way you've spent money and wasted money, and they have no trust in the governing body per se. Not individuals necessarily, but in the governing body. There is no trust. There's very little trust. He said in the school districts, he's absolutely right. Our school district, enrollment keeps going like this, and the taxes keep going like this. There's no trust. There isn't. But here's one thing I would like to recommend that you should consider going forward. System isn't going to change. There are many municipalities that do give a discount to senior citizens for their taxes once you hit 65. That is something I think you actually could incorporate into your taxation system. Percentage, maybe so much at 65, maybe some more at 70. You'd have to work out a formula. But you've got to realize that most senior citizens do not begin to have the income they had when they were working during their lives, and yet they're getting hammered, 58%. I don't know if any of you realize that. And I say, Peter didn't. He didn't believe me until he went and looked it up. 58% of my tax bill is you folks. I don't think that's defensible. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? Just let the public speak first. Mr. Whitehead.
I have to agree wholeheartedly with the last speaker. But I do want to make mention that, at least in my town, we do get a discount, a senior discount. I can tell you that for a fact because I'm a senior. And when I went to see the assessor a year or so ago, as I was approaching my 65th birthday. I was hoping to get an increase in my star, basic star, and I knew I would, but that's a trivial amount. And so I brought my 1040 in, and she said, "Boy, have I got some good news for you." She took a look at my 1040 and she said that on your county taxes, for instance, you're going to get a 40% discount. 40% discount. I didn't know this. I did not know this. It was a total shock to me, and I'm wondering how many other people don't know this. I know a lot of things, but I didn't know this. So please check with your assessors. Maybe I should research it more, but I know all I need to know in my case, and I'm getting a big discount on county, a bigger discount on school. I'm paying maybe 40% of what I paid, a year ago. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board regarding the 2020 budget?
Good.
Mr.
Chairman.
Beatty. Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce, this is Andrew Polano. He's a very high-performing autistic young man. I sat with him this past week. We had a great meeting. He has a lot of great ideas, and I just thought that at this time, even though it's a budget meeting, this does pertain basically
It does.
to the budget. I'd like, if the board would allow him
Yeah.
to speak.
Absolutely.
I think we,
The podium's yours.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Andrew Plano, and I am 25 years old. I have Asperger's, which is a form of autism. People who have autism can have mild or severe symptoms and can be low functioning or high functioning. I am high functioning and I am independent. I would like to maintain my independence by living in my own apartment or townhouse someday. I am starting to look at apartments/condos for myself to live, but some people with autism are very picky. I would like my dog to live with me, so it would have to be dog friendly, and I'm also looking for an area or grass area where I could have my pole mounted weather station to be at my place. I am here to talk to you today about an idea I had for Queensbury or Glens Falls area. I would like a living community to be built in the community for young adults/adults with autism and Asperger's to live more independently and continue to live independently. It does not have to be 29 acres. I'm a big dreamer, and it can be 5 or 10 acres to start. I thought a way to fund this was having a coffee shop built in the community. People who have autism can have a job and work in the coffee shop, and the coffee shop can help fund the community. Some of my ideas are something affordable for young adults living with autism to live on their own in a safe area. Have a coffee shop in the community. Have people with autism run the coffee shop to give people with autism jobs. People with autism have a hard time finding jobs. I would like no rules/regulations within this community, as it can be dog friendly and pet friendly, and my weather station would be allowed. I tried looking up to see how many adults have autism in Warren and Washington counties, but I couldn't find the answer, and I contacted the Autism Society of Albany. They told me there is no census of adults with autism in New York. I did find a few interesting facts I am going to share. I found this fact off of Kirsten Gillibrand's website somewhere. Autism affects more New York children than pediatric cancer, diabetes, and AIDS combined. Autism spectrum disorder affects 1 in 150 New York children. 1 in 68 children in the US have autism. 1 in 42 and 1 in 189 girls have autism. 5 million citizens in the US are living with intellectual disabilities. Only 10% have access to supports to live outside of their family home. 48% of autistic adults report feeling lonely. 57% of autistic adults report feeling depressed. Like the handout you have, I did some research and I found out in the US there are more than 75 intentional communities like the ones you have. And I also found out, they can vary from several condominiums on a cul-de-sac to expansive developments with more than 100 homes. Some national recognized models of intentional communities, like the copy you have in front of you, is a place called First Place located in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a 55-unit apartment complex near downtown Phoenix. And another example I found, Sweetwater Spectrum in Sonoma, California, made up of several 4-bedroom homes in the community. It has a community center with a kitchen, exercise room, media room, expansive outdoor garden, library, and outdoor pool. All in all, I have many friends in the area that are high functioning like me that have also expressed interest to me in the community like this in town. Some of them are also really fancy. In my vision, it does not have to be really fancy like some of them are. I just want to see like a few homes or something for people with a few community homes for people with autism for in the area in like Queensbury or Glens Falls be built. Just a safe environment, me and adults like me who have autism live independently and maintain their independence with no rules. And I also know many people who are on the low end and whose parents would like them to live on their own someday, with supports and housing like this would also be good for that. I am living proof today, and I want others with autism to be living proof just like me. Thank you.
And thank you.
for
and
letting me
thank you.
speak, Doug.
Thank you, and
for
thank you
coming
for
in.
being here. Anyone else wishing to address the board? There being no one, I will close the public hearing. We do have a budget proposal, so anyone wishing to speak, that would be the time. Dennis, anyone wishing to speak regarding the 2020 budget, the time to do that would be when the resolution is being considered. Mr. Dickinson?
I'd just like to respond to Mr. Carney without getting into the weeds. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The reason his county tax went up is the town board, over my objections, took the $100,000 out of the county budget that we normally leave there. So it left the county no alternative but to raise your taxes to cover that $100,000, John. And obviously we put it in our budget and tried to maintain our town tax rate.
Anything further, Dennis? The time to do that would be when the resolutions are being considered. So I've closed the public hearing on the 2020 budget. Now we'll move on to report of the chairman. It's a very busy month with committee meetings on October 21, Economic Development, Health and Human Services, Public Works on October 22nd, County Facilities, Tax, Criminal Justice, October 28th, Environmental Concerns and Real Property. On October 29th, I attended a forum in the town of Lake George. It was the Assembly Minority Task Force on Water. It was very interesting, chaired by Assemblyman Steck. It was a very interesting session. A number of speakers presented at that gathering, and it's I don't need to tell the members here the issues going forward dealing with water quality. On October 31st, I attended Personnel and Finance. November 1, we had the special board meeting on the budget. Frank, thank you very much for all of your efforts. Ryan and the staff, once again, just a superior job in the preparation of the budget. On November 6th, I attended a Lake George Partnership meeting at the village offices. And on November 7th, I attended the occupancy tax meeting here at the Municipal Center. And I just want to, as part of this report, let the board know that I've asked the county administrator, I think it's Monday, the 18th,
Yes.
at the Public Works meeting to make sure that the railroad corridor is on the agenda. Mr. Hajos, whatever condition report we have on the corridor should be delivered at that time. And I asked the administrator to be prepared to discuss our options going forward, up into and including abandonment. So of all of those of you interested in the corridor, in the future of the corridor, I would encourage you to attend that meeting, and we can architect how we're going to move forward beginning on the 18th. And that concludes my report. Report of the committee chairman, Supervisor Dickinson.
Oh, boy. Octax met, this month. We have one, resolution in front of you. It's for funding for the Chris Kindle Mart. That's the pre-Christmas, venue that we have, under the tent in December. It was a tremendous success last year, and they've come back. They're hoping to expand it, and I'm looking forward to it. And then I'd like to make one other comment. At that meeting, sorry Mike isn't here, Treasurer Swan, on an aside, went up about occupancy tax budgets and indicated that we were in trouble. He was using internal information that was meant for our worksheets to make sure that we didn't get in trouble. And at the rate we were going, it showed that we were getting in trouble. So it was very beneficial to us. We were aware of it long before he told us. And I felt it was inappropriate of him to bring it up in that public venue. But I just want to assure everyone here and the public that we are on safe ground with occupancy tax. We have made some major changes with occupancy tax in the last few years. We don't have enough occupancy tax for all the programs and things that people want to do. So we have some hard choices ahead of us, but we are not out of money. And certainly won't be while I'm here. So thank you for your time. That's my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Merlino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tourism letter was sent out to all the supervisors. You all should have received it, general information. A German tour operated, a FAM tour, was here in October, coordinated by I Love New York. Tanya from Group Sales took all these people around to Sagamore, Prospect Mountain, Factory Outlet, and a few other places to show them what we had in our county to offer. The Factory Outlet shopping video is now being promoted for the holiday season. Tourism is working with Roost up north to promote Ski Adirondack, a campaign designed to bring awareness to the 6 ski mountains in the Adirondacks. And the tourism meeting is scheduled for 11/19. It'll be short. There's only one resolution at the board meeting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Stroud.
No committee report this month, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To avoid any controversy this morning, I'm going to yield the floor back.
Thank you. Supervisor Beatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Facilities met on October 22nd. There's no resolutions before you. We had some good discussions on Office of Emergency Services. Also, we brought up the fact that the Climate Smart Committee is looking to do, that Mr. Hajo's looking to do an energy audit on the main facility here. So there's nothing earth-shattering in your packet from facilities. At this time, though, I would like to thank Andrew Polano for coming up here. It takes a lot of guts to get up in front of this group, or any group, but especially this group, and speak. And I thought he was very eloquent. He was to the point, and he did his homework. And there are facilities around the United States that help autistic individuals. And I will help champion this year to see if we can look at Warren County in some aspect being one of those counties that actually assist and try to make people more independent. And at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Moore, if I could, if he did any research on this, because I did run this by Mr. Moore. were you able to find anything in New York State?
I'm aware that there are some counties, Dutchess County is one of them. Their initiative is called Think Differently. I'm not quite sure what the details of that are, but I'd be happy to look into it. I'll call the county executive and see what they're doing.
I'd appreciate that, and I think the board probably would support something along those lines, making people, giving them the chance to be more independent. I think it's just one of the things we as a board should do. And taking care of our seniors is right up there with helping individuals who have challenges. So thank you, Mr. Moore. I'll look forward to hearing about that. And again, thank you, Andrew. You're quite the young man. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And Ryan, when you're ready, report that out to the appropriate committee.
I will do that.
Okay, Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank Andrew for coming up. That was beautiful. It was it touched my heart, and you did your homework, and I'm very proud that you presented that and made us all aware, because you're absolutely right. And I would like to jump on with Doug and help move this forward with our administrator as he brings it out. So thank you again for coming and presenting the facts. Appreciate it. And even though I visited or went to quite a few committee meetings, I don't have a report, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett. Supervisor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance met on October 31st. Looking for your approvals on resolutions 461, 462, 491 through 512, and 516. Resolutions 495 through 501 are establishing or increasing reserve funding to various projects, buildings, equipment, etc. These total $650,000. They're all very vital and crucial. And this makes perfect sense to do this while we have the resources. So I look for your approval on that. Frank may have a little more to add towards that in his report. Resolutions 505 through 509 are establishing capital projects to repair, rehabilitate, and reconstruct roads and bridges in Warren County. And one final thing, Treasurer is not here today, but if you all look at your emails, sales tax is up 2.9% over last year's prior total so far, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was through October.
Through October. Yes.
Through October. Supervisor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Budget Committee did meet on October 22nd to have their first look at the proposed 2020 budget. We discussed reductions in requested appropriations and increases in revenue, the amount of sales tax that would be included in the 2020 budget, among other things. That was basically what that meeting was about. However, on October 16th, prior to our last board meeting, the Budget Committee also met, and as Supervisor Sokol alluded to, there was resolutions 495 through 501 is 6, I believe, reserves and assigned fund balance accounts proposed to be established, $650,000 from the general fund balance, and there's also another $330,000 within the 2020 budget of funding for these reserves. I guess just to highlight a couple of them, one of them is for SUNY Adirondack to increase our funding of their operating condition over the next couple of years, and also Countryside to help. We had a study done on Countryside to improve the conditions there, the rooms, and et cetera. And this is a start to address that. Also, the feasibility of our capital project list. That's, I think, over $250 million. So it's a small attempt, but it's there nonetheless. And I would encourage your support for these resolutions. Also on November 1st, as you know, we were all here, most of us were here and represented the 2020 budget, and I would ask for your support on that.
Thank you, Frank. And once again, great job. Supervisor Hyde.
No report.
Supervisor Garrity.
Yes, personnel also met on Halloween. We have to blaze the trail for the finance committee. There's 4 resolutions that our committee approved, and 489 appoints Marcy Flores through our organizational meeting. She's well deserved of this appointment to keep her going. And then 516 deals with compensation, and 518 deals with salaries, and that's it, my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Criminal Justice Public Safety met on October 22nd. There's 9 resolutions before you, numbers 463 through 461. 3 are from Office Emergency Services, 4 from probation, 1 from public defender, and 1 for sheriff. 7 are regarding agreements. 1's for an MOU with Warren County Employment and Training, and 1's a grant application for pre-disaster mitigation. We also, at our criminal justice meeting, set up a subcommittee that was Supervisors Bramer, Hogan, McGowan, and Driscoll, along with County Administrator Moore, to look into the bail reform issue. And before you today is proposed floor resolution number 1. I'm sure we'll have a discussion on this later, but I want to thank everybody for their work on it. And I'd also like to thank Office of Emergency Services, Amy Hirsch, for all the work that she has done with the towns for the storm recovery after the Halloween storm. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No reports.
Supervisor McDevitt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The probably one of the more difficult things to create in Warren County is a good job. So it's nice to see a plastics company, a Texas-based plastics company, come to Washington County, creating 50 jobs, and that being the former GE dewatering site in Fort Edward. So we welcome them, and it's good news for Washington County. Some other good news in general terms, the Social Security is going to relocate to the old post office in Glens Falls. It's a long-term stable tenant, which will be good for that section of the city. Our project on South Street, the governor has been very receptive to the city's requests, and that project, as far as the farmers market, is coming along. On a downer in terms of bad news, we continue to be faced with shootings. Yesterday in California, we saw another shooting. It would seem that we could basically get one thing accomplished, in this country, and that's basic background checks as it relates to people that have access to guns. So it would seem as if our political establishment should move in the right direction and minimally give us background checks as it relates to this issue. Find some coverage. Look the NRA down the barrel of that gun and tell them it's time for background checks. Thank you.
Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you very much. The real property auction was held on October 19th. There are several resolutions in your packet related to that. If you have any questions, our real property director is here and you can ask her. Environmental Concerns of Real Property met on October 28th, and we had a presentation from DEC officials on the PFAS, that they are doing testing throughout the county, and that involves any place where they've used firefighting foam, like at our airport, and also old town-owned landfills. So we're hopeful that the testing continues to show that there are no problems in Warren County. So the state is continuing to follow up on that, and I will try to make sure that we are as up to date as possible. Next week we are meeting, and we will be talking about the septic inspection at transfer law proposal. So if you're interested in that, please come on Tuesday morning. And we will also have a discussion about the energy audit for this building and how we are going to move forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Support Services also met on October 28th. We had a few items to discuss. We started off with county historian giving an excellent presentation, and I recommend to everyone, if you have the opportunity, you and friends and relatives, go visit our new museum for Warren County history. It's off Gurney Lane, right at the beginning of the entrance to Queensbury. Awesome bike trip. Great for walking, but if I was a mountain biker, that would be a place to go. IT, Mike Colvin, spoke and requested some money to be transferred. He's continues to work on upgrading the county website. We look forward to the changes with that. Pam Vogel, our county clerk, requested some changes to her staffing organization, and there will be resolutions to that regard that passed. But in the process, Supervisor Wild recommended that because there's such a backup often with citizens going to get services in person, perhaps we could offer online transaction capability in our office to lessen the weight that so many of us have to endure if we go to make a transaction right here in the county center. And then last, it was a shortened meeting in Resolution 485 dealing with opioid legislation. Because we didn't have a full-time allotted, or we didn't take full-time that we could potentially take to discuss this resolution. I've asked Mary, our county attorney, to further explain the issues surrounding this resolution 485. And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Supervisor McGowan, I appreciate the opportunity to attend as many meetings as I can. I'd like to also thank Mr. Polano for his comments. I'd like to meet with him or get my contact information to Mr. Beatty after the meeting. The good news is that there are opportunities available. The laws regarding pets in apartments are a lot more open today than they have been in the past. This is the time of this season of giving. I'd like to thank our Veteran Services for all of the different programs that they've done recently for veterans as well as active service personnel. Our county also has a proud history of identifying and sponsoring a number of low and fixed income families and individuals of all ages with giving programs, and I appreciate their continuing to do those. There's a lot of people in our county who don't need a handout, but they do need a hand up, and I appreciate everything that all county employees do on that behalf. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Supervisor Frazier, it's good to see you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Health, Human, and Social Services met on October the 21st. We only had reports from Social Services and Public Health, so we only had 2 resolutions this month. Resolution 478 from Social Services accepting a donation from the Warren County Children's Committee for monies to be used toward foster care services and authorizing the chairman to send a letter of appreciation. 479 is for Public Health. It's authorizing a contract with a certified coding and OASIS vendor to be determined to provide services which will be used by the home care agency within the Health Services Division. So those are our only 2 resolutions. But I too would like to thank Amy Hirsch and Kevin Hajos with Department of Public Works. They have really worked with us very closely. We appreciate all the attention that they've given considering the circumstances we were in. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. DPW did meet October 21st, and we have 3 resolutions. The first one, 481, is authorizing an agreement with wood waste reduction services to provide waste wood reduction at various sites in Warren County. 482 is an agreement with Warrensburg Collision Care for auto body repair services for the Department of Public Works. And 483 is authorizing an agreement with the Thurman Connection Snowmobile Club to allow snowmobiles on the county railroad right away in the town of Stony Creek and the town of Thurman. And also, I'd like to echo the sentiments expressed by Supervisor Leggett and Frazier. Thanks to Amy Drexel and her department, and also to all the town highway superintendents and their employees, because I'll tell you, it was a mess. And these guys did the job. I know I had 8 roads that were severely damaged, and it went smoothly, and we just dealt with it. And I know that all the other, what makes it happen is our employees that are out there working, and they need to know that they're appreciated, along with the county and the county employees also. Thank you.
Thank you. And just let me say to you and to your committee and your subcommittees on that were involved with vetting of interest in the railroad and negotiations, that I think that you've done just a superior job to this point in time, and I have every confidence that that the committee and the participants in the process will continue to do just a wonderful job in guiding us forward as it relates to the corridor. Thank you. Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another productive month for Cornell Cooperative Extension. Their annual report and program guide is in your file here, so enjoy. They conducted games of logging 1 and 2 this past month, as well as several chainsaw safety classes. And the utilities are being connected to the new training center as we speak. Very exciting. I'd like to echo the thanks to our emergency services and DPW. With over 41 roads in the town of Johnsburg sustaining some damage, that's a little bit over a third of our roads. Our highway guys, as they are in all of our towns, are heroes. And with a lot of help from the county, we're going to dig back out. It's going to be a long process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Report of the county administrator.
Good morning. We have 5 employee anniversaries this month. With 20 years, Laura Lane from DPW and Tina Murray from DSS. With 25 years, our excellent public health director, Janelle Jones. With 30 years, Monica Gerard in the sheriff's office. And also from the sheriff's department, civil officer Michael Nissen with 35 years. Thank you all for your dedication to the people of Warren County. Just wanted to touch back on 2 points made earlier. The first on the OCTAX, I met with Supervisor Dickinson, and I'm confident that we have a good plan going forward. We do project this out 5 years. We will not ever run out of money in that fund. We're flexible. We change the strategy year to year to do what we need to do. On the Lake George, the gentleman that was discussing his county tax rate who lives in Lake George, I just want to point out, as Supervisor Dickinson said, the town used to leave $100,000 with the county, which went directly to reducing the county tax rate for Lake George residents. The town decided not to do that anymore. That's the biggest factor in the increase in their rate this year, is that decision made by the town board. I know that everybody in this room knows how to take a punch, but that punch is misdirected at this board. Even if the town did not do that, because of the equalization rate in Lake George dropping 1 point, and because Lake George has grown by a little over 2% as opposed to the rest of the county growing about a 1.5%. Even if this board reduced the tax levy, that rate likely would have gone up for the town residents. I just wanted to make that point. We have 2 late resolutions this month. The second, floor resolution 2, is being requested by County Treasurer Mike Swan. Mike is on the West Coast today. Otherwise, I'm sure he'd like to be here because it's great news. This resolution will allow the refinancing of all of our 2009 bonds, which are the highest interest bonds at the moment, and they're also taxable. In doing the refinance, we're going to tax exempt bonds. These were 25-year bonds, and they were largely for the construction of the Human Services Building. The principal remaining on these bonds is $13,335,000, and combined with the interest, we would spend about $21.7 million under the current financing over the next 15 years. With the new rate, which will be at prevailing AA rates plus 25 basis points, we would pay an estimated $3.4 million less from now through 2034. and that translates into a present value savings of $2.9 million. This resolution needs to be brought to the floor, and it'll require 2/3 support from the Board of Supervisors. This past month has been very busy for me between budget and the storm and CSEA negotiations, but I'd like to dispense with my typical review of those meetings because the first late resolution, floor resolution number 1, is long, and I'm going to read it out loud because the subject matter is bail and discovery reform. It's probably the most important issue being discussed statewide right now. And I do want to thank Criminal Justice Chair Craig Leggett and the department heads and supervisors on the subcommittee who helped to write this resolution, Supervisors Bramer, Driscoll, Hogan, and McGowan. So this is the resolution as it stands. The title is Imploring the State of New York to immediately amend or delay implementation of bail and discovery reform laws that will endanger the people of New York and reverse decades of bipartisan progress in reducing crime. Whereas protecting people from harm by enforcing the rule of law is the foundational role of government, and whereas county governments are vested by the state of New York with the responsibility to protect the most vulnerable among us, including the socioeconomically disadvantaged, the disabled, the elderly, and children, and whereas no group is more vulnerable than the victims of crime, and a just society demands that crime victims should be recognized as key participants within the criminal justice system and be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. And whereas for the past 25 years, the state of New York has committed itself to reducing crime and has succeeded, as evidenced by official U.S. Department of Justice uniform crime reporting statistics, showing that New York transformed from the second most dangerous state in America in the early 1990s to the safest large state in America by the early 2000s. And whereas in the final stages of adopting its fiscal year 2020 budget, the state of New York enacted sweeping criminal justice reforms, including the elimination of cash bail for many specific enumerated crimes and the imposition of stringent discovery mandates on police and prosecutors. And whereas under bail reform, beginning January 1st, 2020, judges will be stripped of their discretion to set bail for many specific enumerated crimes, which means that those suspected of committing these crimes can no longer be held in jail after their arrest, regardless of the strength of the case against these defendants, or the length of the potential sentence faced by these defendants, or the extent of the harm allegedly caused by these defendants. And instead, these defendants will be released back into the general public. And whereas these crimes include those that result in the deaths of innocent people, including several subcategories of homicide and manslaughter, resulting in those responsible for these deaths being released back into the community of grieving families. And whereas these crimes include making a terroristic threat and money laundering in support of terrorism in the 3rd and 4th degree, resulting in those alleged to have supported terrorism in this manner or who have threatened to commit acts of terrorism being released immediately from police custody. And whereas these crimes include promoting an obscene sexual performance by a child, possessing an obscene sexual performance by a child, failure to register as a sex offender, and patronizing a person for prostitution in a school zone, resulting in suspected child predators being released and returning into our community. And whereas these crimes include aggravated assault upon a person less than 11 years old, reckless assault of a child by a daycare provider, criminal sale of a controlled substance to a child, abandonment of a child, and criminal possession of a weapon on school grounds, resulting in those suspected to have physically harmed or endangered children in this manner being freed from custody. And whereas these crimes include female genital mutilation, stalking in the 2nd degree, and aggravated harassment, resulting in those suspected of violating victims in this manner being returned to the community of those victims. And whereas these crimes include endangering the welfare of a vulnerable elderly person or an incompetent or physically disabled person, resulting in the potential for further endangerment of seniors and these defenseless individuals. And whereas these crimes include aggravated cruelty to animals, torturing animals, and injuring animals, resulting in the immediate release of those suspected of deliberately injuring, torturing, and killing animals. And whereas these crimes include assault in the 3rd degree, aggravated vehicular assault, and other crimes of physical violence against people. And whereas these crimes include burglary of a residence, resulting in the immediate release of these individuals back into the neighborhoods they are suspected of targeting. And whereas these crimes include bail jumping and unlawfully fleeing a police officer in a motor vehicle, resulting in release on recognizance of the very individuals who have demonstrated a propensity to evade the law. And whereas all of the offenders mentioned heretofore are at risk of not showing up for court, thereby placing a burden on public employees who, under this law, are required to send multiple court appearance reminders to these offenders, as well as on police officers and district attorneys who must commit resources to tracking and pursuing those who evade prosecution. And whereas all offenders who are currently being held in custody for non-qualifying crimes, including those mentioned heretofore, will be eligible for release from custody on January 1st, 2020. And whereas the discovery mandates imposed by the state of New York will require police and district attorneys, beginning January 1st, 2020, to turn over voluminous trial-related materials to defense attorneys within 15 days, creating a mandate that will inevitably not be achieved in some cases and may result in the inability of the people to properly prosecute cases against criminal defendants. And whereas the Office of New York State's Chief Law Enforcement Officer, Attorney General Letitia James, testified at a state legislative hearing on October 28th, 2019, that there will be implementation difficulties because prosecutors across the state lack the resources required to fully comply with discovery mandates. And whereas the Attorney General's office further testified that their own office, which carries a limited criminal caseload, lacks resources required to fully comply with discovery mandates and consequently needs an additional $10 million in state funding. And whereas discovery reform will also result in an opportunity for defendants to gain access to crime scenes that may include a victim's residence, thereby giving defendants accused of burglaries, assaults, rapes, and other crimes committed in victims' homes the right to return to those same homes. And whereas the issues mentioned heretofore will undeniably impact past, present, and future victims of crime in a negative manner, and in so doing, the bail and discovery reforms adopted by the state of New York will themselves further victimize these innocent individuals. And whereas these bail and discovery laws in their current form represent a clear and present danger to society, will tilt the scales of justice in favor of suspected criminals and away from innocent crime victims, and risk reversing decades of bipartisan progress made by the state of New York in reducing crime. And whereas the fundamental responsibility of governments to protect the vulnerable in society demands that the shortcomings of these laws be remedied prior to their effective date of January 1st, 2020, now therefore be it resolved that the Warren County Board of Supervisors hereby implores the state of New York to immediately amend or otherwise delay implementation of these laws by convening an emergency session of the state legislature or by emergency executive authority or by any other means deemed possible by the state, and to do so before December 31st, 2019. And be it further resolved that the following improvements to these laws be implemented as soon as possible. 1, give judges the discretion to impose bail when appropriate for all of the crimes enumerated in this resolution. 2, increase the discovery timeline from 15 days to a minimum of 45 days. 3, phase in discovery reform by applying these new mandates only to misdemeanors effective January 1st, 2020, and then to felonies effective January 1st, 2021, and repeal the provision that makes the new discovery mandates applicable to violations of the vehicle and traffic law. 4, require that court appearance reminders are sent not only to defendants, but also to the victims of their crimes. And 5, extend appropriate dignity, fairness, and respect to crime victims by soliciting input from these victim advocate organizations and considering their suggestions for improving these laws. And be it further resolved that the Warren County Board of Supervisors asks all counties in New York State to urge their state representatives to take immediate action on the foregoing issues. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution be provided to every member of the New York State Legislature. Attorney General Letitia James, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Governor Andrew Cuomo, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Charles Schumer, the New York State Association of Counties, the New York State Sheriff's Association, the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, the District Attorneys Association of New York, the New York State Defenders Association, the New York State Probation Officers Association, the New York Council of Probation Administrators, the Association of Justices of the Supreme Court of the State of New York, the New York State Association of City Court Judges, the County Judges Association of the State of New York, and the County Attorneys Association of the State of New York. And this resolution will need a motion from the board to come to the floor.
Very good. Does that conclude your report?
That concludes my report.
That concludes your report. The 2/3 that was mentioned on the bonding is not to bring it to the floor. A simple majority after the clerk reads the rolls. The 2/3 will be required on the vote to approve, just in case you misunderstood. County Attorney, report by the County Attorney.
Good morning. As Supervisor Loeb mentioned, I wanted to give the board more details regarding resolution number 485, opting out of the negotiating class in the national prescription opioid litigation. As you know, the judge presiding over the multi-district litigation in the Northern District of New York has approved a request to certify a negotiating class. The purpose of this negotiating class is to set forth a framework and to assist the county and parties to achieve a national resolution of the opioid litigation. Even though this negotiating class is created in the Northern District of Ohio, if Warren County does not opt out of this class, they will automatically be enrolled as part of this MDL negotiating class. The purpose of this class is to get a national resolution for this litigation. It is important to understand that at this time, there is no settlement agreement. Negotiations have not even started on what this settlement might look like. The judge in the MDL litigation is starting the negotiating process by asking the counties to lock into this class before a deal is even discussed. Once in the class, any class member will be bound by a vote of around 70%. However, any county that opts out of this class will retain any rights to negotiate separately regarding the same legal claims, even if the court approves the settlement for the MDL class. Napoli Skolnick, the attorneys representing Warren County, have advised the county to opt out of the MDL class for the following reasons. Currently, a coordinated proceeding is happening in New York. This means, although numerous counties have filed suit, the court has chosen 2 bellwether counties to continue the litigation while all other counties wait for a resolution. Currently, the 2 bellwether counties are Suffolk and Nassau County, and they're engaged in discovery. The judge presiding over these trials has already issued several decisions which have been fair and impartial. In the New York specific litigation, a special master has been designated to aid with settlement negotiations. This is a dedicated resource that is not available to the MDL negotiating class. Additionally, the New York case has a firm trial date. The New York cases have already been coordinated, which means any party still active in the New York litigation will not be bound by a national agreement, but will have the ability to vote on any settlement that is specific to New York. If Warren County does not opt out of the MDL class, we lose that. Finally, the New York Constitution, Article 9, and local cases surrounding home rule are supportive of local rights. In states that do not have a strong home rule law, the state can come in and preempt local claims. However, in New York, because of the strong home rule law, there is no risk of state preemption, and each county's individual claim can survive. There is local autonomy in relation to New York State. Again, this is not the case with the MDL negotiating class. For the foregoing reasons, Napoli Skolnick has recommended that Warren County opt out of the MDL negotiating class, which is the outcome that will be achieved if this board passes Resolution 485 today. If you would like further specifics regarding this information, I would invite questions in an executive session.
Alrighty. We'll entertain that possibility and any discussion when we bring it and make this part of our agenda, which will happen here in just but a few seconds. Does that conclude your report, ma'am? Okay.
The second issue I wanted to discuss with the board is that yesterday, November 14th, Attorney Daniel Vincelat filed a summons and complaint naming as defendants Warren County, the Warren County Board of Supervisors, me, Kevin Hajos, Don DeGraw, Ross Dewberry, and Jeff Tennyson. Mr. Vincelat has accused the county of breach of contract, breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, tortious interference with a contract, fraud, unjust enrichment, and quantum merit. I want to be very clear about this. As your legal counsel, I feel this complaint has no merit, and I feel this way for the following reasons. In Mr. Vincelat's January 20th, 2016 retainer letter, Mr. Vincelat wrote, "This fee will include all aspects of the eminent domain proceeding," and I quote, "from conference and negotiations to motion practice and trial." This retainer incorporates the terms set forth in the resolution of the Warren County Board of Supervisors as to the cap on legal fees in this matter. Additionally, the service provider agreement, which was signed by both Mr. Vincelat and the county, incorporated this January 20th, 2016 retainer letter and further clarified the county shall pay the provider a sum not to exceed $20,000, with this amount to be inclusive of subcontracting with Thurston, Casale, and Ryan for an appraisal report in an amount not to exceed $5,000. The service provider agreement further states the county shall not be liable to the provider for any other services and or expenses unless otherwise agreed to in writing by the county. Finally, resolution number 671 of 2015, which Mr. Vincelat references in his retainer letter, also states an amount not to exceed, with this amount to be inclusive of the subcontracting with Thurston, Casale, and Ryan for an appraisal report, again, not to exceed $5,000. The resolution goes on to further say that the not to exceed amount cannot be increased without further resolution from the Board of Supervisors. If you remember, Mr. Vincelat exceeded this not to exceed amount before he went to trial in April of 2018. At no point before this trial did he come to any committee and requested an increase in his not to exceed amount. Instead, Mr. Vincelat came to the June 2018 committee meeting after his presence was requested by this board. In light of the facts I've just explained, it is our plan to make a motion to dismiss before we even answer this complaint, unless I hear differently from this board.
Thank you. Reading of communications.
The only communication we have this month is the Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting Corp. September payment in the amount of $3,075.
Reading of resolutions.
Proposed resolution numbers 461 through 518 were mailed to the members of the Board of Supervisors and posted to the Warren County website last week. Resolution number 499 was amended after mailing and emailed to the board yesterday. Copies of the amended resolution are in your folders. Motion is needed to approve the amendments to resolution number 499 as provided.
Supervisor Dickinson, Supervisor Simpson on the amendment. Any questions? Ready for the question? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, there are the two proposed floor resolutions to be dealt with. Floor resolution number 1 is imploring New York State to immediately amend or delay implementation of bail and discovery reform that Mr. Moore talked about. So if the board is interested, a motion is needed to bring that to the floor.
Supervisor Dickinson, Supervisor Leggett on the second. Thank you. All in favor of bringing this to the floor for consideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay. And then proposed floor resolution number 2 is the refunding bond resolution. And a
Chair,
motion.
Chair, I'll entertain a motion. Supervisor Sokol, Supervisor Thomas on the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay.
That will require a 2/3 vote for approval. There'll be a roll call on that, correct?
Yes, so floor resolution number 1 is now resolution number 519, and floor resolution number 2 is now 520, and 520 will require a roll call. I would also note that your index does not reflect resolution number 472 that relates to the EDC option agreement. That does not show it as being a roll call vote, but it will be.
472 is a roll call vote.
Correct.
And 520. I'll now open the floor up to the audience. Any comments from anyone regarding any resolutions presently before the board?
My name is Marcy Flores. I'm the Warren County Public Defender. I would like to address the resolution that just was number 419 of 2019, the floor resolution regarding bail and discovery reform. Okay. I was reading a New York Times article this week where Tom Hanks is being interviewed about playing Fred Rogers. He is not discussing bail reform or discovery reform, but he was talking about life lessons, and I think it relates to this matter. He said, "A long time ago, I learned how important it was to show up a bit early, be ready to go, and respect the whole process. And I think that you could respect the whole process even when other people do not." And I added the word "do not agree." And I feel that the bail discovery and these reforms are life lessons. We learned about, we meaning the criminal justice community and everyone else in New York State, learned about the bail reforms in the spring. And everyone in the criminal justice system has been preparing for it. Just like Tom Hanks talked about, we're showing up early and we're being prepared. However, this community has had a huge shock, and it's a huge loss and trauma to all of us. And often people react with emotion when you have trauma and shock. But as attorneys, we're taught to think logically and without emotion. And I believe the criminal justice system is doing that when we look at this new legislation. There is always going to be challenges to the new laws, and the high courts are going to make determinations and rulings on them, and so the laws will be modified as time goes on. I feel I'm in a unique position to speak to you. I am the victim of a violent crime. I have been a prosecutor for 18 years. I have been in the public defender's office for over 15, and I've been doing prosecution or defense for over 36 years. So I feel that I have some knowledge in this field for you, okay? I have never drafted legislation, but I have always had to deal with the result of legislation. In the 80s, DWI cases were being dismissed due to the sufficiency of the accusatory instruments. So I sat on a state committee where we drafted the DWI Bill of Particulars supporting deposition document, which is a 2-page document that you see with every DWI case in New York State. It was challenged, and it is successful, and it's still being used today. In addition, also in the 80s, a criminal assault third charge, a misdemeanor charge of assault third, was dismissed in New York State because it was not legally sufficient. It didn't have all the elements. Each crime has certain elements. You have to make sure you have all the elements. Well, I am rather old, and there were no computers in the DA's offices back then, so they only had word processing. So I had to draft a book with someone else on how to write an accusatory instrument for every crime that exists in New York State. Thank God that's not in publication anymore, and we don't have to use it, and we have computers. But again, you learn that you have to deal with these situations as they come up. And one of the things that I have here is that as I'm looking at these materials, is that you have qualifying and non-qualifying crimes. Qualifying crimes are where you have to have bail. Non-qualifying crimes are where you don't have to have bail, where bail would not be set. And so as a former prosecutor and as a defense attorney, when you look at a crime, you look at the elements of what happened. And there can be ways to draft crimes and based on the elements that you have to make it a qualifying crime. So there might have been a crime that occurred here in this county recently where the original accusatory instrument was not a qualifying crime. But when the DA's office presented the case to the grand jury, they were able to take the elements of the crime that they had and made it a qualifying crime, and therefore they could have bail set on it. And I think it requires the DA's office and law enforcement to look at crimes differently. Looking at the qualifying ones where you can set bail and try to work on that. When I look at this resolution, there's some crimes in it that I've never seen prosecuted, okay? If you go to page, okay, here we go. On page 1, money laundering in support of terrorism in the 3rd and 4th degrees. Well, I have never seen that happen. But if you look at a qualifying crime, which is called conspiracy in the 1st degree, the person could be charged with that and have bail set. So yes, there may be one that isn't included, but there are a lot on the included list. It's about 3 pages of included lists. There is also on page 2 in the 2nd paragraph, female genital mutilation. Never saw that prosecuted, but what you could charge is assault in the 2nd degree. So therefore you could get it as a qualifying crime. So yes, there are some that are excluded, but you can also charge a different way. So I think that piece needs to be put out there so you understand that. One of my concerns is that our Constitution has a long history of protecting the rights of accused as well as the rights of victim. Everyone charged with a crime is presumed innocent, no matter what the crime is. And they have a right to a fair trial, right to liberty, and right to a speedy trial. Currently, at arraignments, there is not consistency in Warren County, Washington County, Saratoga County, any county in New York State about what bail is set on what charge. Each judge has their own discretion. So I have clients who have been charged with stealing food, stealing diapers, stealing an item from Walmart, and they have bail set on them. And bail for a person who is indigent, which is the people I represent, $250 cash bail over $1,000 bond, which means you end up having to pay $100 on a $1,000 bond. My clients can't pay that, so they're sitting in the jail. And in the jail, their lives fall apart. There is trauma to their family, to the community. They lose their jobs. If they had a job, they don't get services for substance abuse, mental health, other conditions, that they have that they need. Their family could lose their housing. So the bail reform piece is very important to me, because especially on misdemeanors and violations, by not having bail on those low-level offenses, it would allow people to be out. It's easier to aid in their defense if they are out versus in jail. The jail has rules and regulations. I respect every one of them. It's for the safety of myself, the inmates, and all the people who work in the jail. But I can't get there all the time. And phone calls are recorded. So if the client is calling a family member saying, I want to talk about my case, that phone call is recorded. It can be handed over to the DA's office and used against my client in the prosecution. And that's a problem for me. I try to go to the jail often to see clients, but I have a lot of clients, and so do people in my office, and it is difficult to see everyone all the time, so we do phone calls. The jail does not record phone calls between attorney and clients, and I know they don't, and I respect that because they're doing what they need to do. But there's problems as a result of having clients in custody on low-level charges. According to the Chief Defenders Association, that between 2007 and 2008, the Warren County unsentenced jail population, people not sentenced, increased 20%. And so that's a problem for me. My clients are presumed innocent and they can't afford bail, and like I said, it affects all their families. I've cut this down a lot. So the bail factors become important for me because the prosecution can require bail and pretrial detention for people facing alleged violent felonies where violence is used or threatened, and some misdemeanors like sex offenses and witness tampering. And even for some nonviolent felonies, it also applies to too. So it's not every crime is not excluded. There are many ones that are listed. Bail is a wealth-based system. People with money can get out and people with money cannot. It's as simple as that. And I feel that we could agree that that would be unfair. It should be that people want to contest the allegations against them should be able to aid their attorney in their defense. And I think that's important. And it is much harder to defend a client when they are in the jail than when they are out of jail. In addition, New York State is not the only state doing bail reform. It's occurring throughout, and discovery reform is occurring throughout the United States. In page 2 on paragraph 8 of the resolution, it talks about public officials notifying clients about court appearances. What they're talking about is not the DA's office, and they're not talking about law enforcement. That's Office of Court Administration. So the courts are going to be required to notify clients about their upcoming court dates. They have to notify them by either email, mail, text, or voicemail. And so OCA is developing their systems in order to have this happen. So when it says in here, public employees, you're thinking it's the DA's office, you're thinking law enforcement, because that's what I would think, and it is not. I just wanted to clarify that for you. Discovery reform is also very important. The only thing I can ask for in a criminal case is to have a fair playing field. That's all I'm asking for. There's two sides to every story. Often, you only hear the side of the prosecution and law enforcement when someone is arrested, because they have all the information. I don't, okay? And so the new discovery laws allow my office and all defense attorneys to get information in a more timely manner. We are now able to get the quote res gesti. Res gesti is a legal term. It deals with the evidence, circumstances, remarks, and what constitutes admissible evidence in a court of law. I normally don't get those till the eve of trial. The eve of trial is usually Friday at 5 o'clock, and the trial starts on Monday, and I get a box of stuff that I then have to go through, go over it with the client. By these discovery changes, it allows my client and myself to know more information that is occurring, so I can make a better assessment of the case. It also will allow the cases to go through the criminal justice system faster. One of the things that is not in the legislation is that the client can waive the time frame of this 15 days and 45 days. The DA's office can get extension for further time, for good cause, but we can actually waive it. And I can tell you that myself, Mr. Carasone, and Judge Hall, our county court judge, will be meeting on this topic on Monday, going over new forms that deal with these issues and new standards that the court is making sure that occurs. So when you see the 15 days, you say, oh my God, they're never gonna have enough time to do that. Those time periods could be waived, and that's important for you to know. There is something called standards and goals. Standards and goals is a time frame in which a case needs to go through the criminal justice system. On a felony, it is 6 months from the date that the person is arraigned. On misdemeanors, it's substantially less. However, not all courts adhere to standards and goals. County court does, and Glens Falls City Court does. That's it. The other courts do not. They are not required to. They are standards and goals. They are not mandated requirements. And therefore, in terms of the time frame to get cases, if you're waiting for discovery and waiting for discovery and waiting for Brady material, which is material that needs to be provided to exonerate the client, or which tends to exonerate the client, that's important to get, and we need that sooner rather than later so we can analyze the case. Okay, on page 3 in the first paragraph, there is a concern that the accused would be given access to the alleged crime victims, the crime scene, such as the victim's home. Well, this issue has always been around. If a crime scene occurs, the defense attorney can make a application to the court to inspect that location. It's decision whether the judge will allow it, who can go there. I can tell you that in most crime cases where it occurs in a home, the police will go in, they'll videotape, take pictures, whatever they're going to do, and those materials become discoverable, and the defense attorney gets it. So I think that they're feeling that the defendant is going to come into the home when the victim is there again, and that is not how that situation would ever be considered by a court. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. One of the things that's not in here that's very important for you to know is that now I have reverse discovery material that I have to provide to the DA's office. When I have discovery, I have to turn it over to them, and I have time frames, and that's not in here, but it's important for you to know. I'm not complaining about it. It makes it an even playing field. If I have something to exonerate my client, I give it to the DA's office. They can look at it, and they can make a determination as how it affects their case and how this fits into the whole thing. So it really does make the playing field a fairer playing field. Approximately 95% of all cases end in plea deals, and most times at this point in time, clients don't get to see the evidence against them. So they're in jail, they don't have the discovery, they have an offer, and if their offer is, let's say on a felony, 6-5 split, 6 months incarceration, 5 years probation. Well, on a 6-month sentence, you do 4, and let's say we're up to month 3, it's easier for them to say, yeah, I'd rather take this deal and get out of jail. I didn't do it, but I'd rather do that. I'd rather just resolve it this way. The courts are allowed to take pleas when someone says, I didn't do it. It's called an Alford plea. The court makes an inquiry of the defendant saying, are you aware of what you're charged with? Do you understand what your exposure could be if you were convicted of this crime? And as a result of knowing what your exposure is, are you taking this plea because you're afraid that if you go to trial, you could be convicted? So someone could admit that they didn't do it, but they want to take the plea so they can get out of jail. And that happens often.
Marcy, if you could conclude.
Okay, not a problem. I'd just like to address the last 5 issues at the bottom, which says, keeps the removal of bail on violations and misdemeanors and allow judges to set bail on felonies. I think in terms of, I've been asked about what compromise would you be willing to make? I'm not a legislator, but I think that if the bail factors are for misdemeanor and violations, that becomes extremely important. In terms of 2, does the time frame need to be 45 days? I think that it doesn't necessarily need to be. I think 15 days is appropriate because they could get extension, but 45 days wouldn't be the end of the world, okay? I strongly oppose number 3, removing V&T, vehicle and traffic charges, from the reform. What they're talking about is DMV has to get their records to the DA's office. Well, they're a state agency. They should be able to get someone's driving record to the DA's office. Number 4, the courtroom is a public place. Never has there been a requirement to notify a victim to appear in court. That's a courtroom is a public place. Cases are public. They can call the court, get the date. They can call the DA's office. The DA's office has crime victim specialists who can notify them about that. So I think that one on that one. And number 5, I believe lobbying groups have actually been involved when the legislation was made. So at the end, when I think about Tom Hanks' words, a long time ago, I learned it was important to show up early. We have done that. We are prepared. And I respect the process, and I would ask you to support the legislation.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board regarding any resolutions presently before the board? There being no one, Chair will entertain motion for roll call. Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if it was going to be, but 519, roll call, please.
(519) roll call. Any other roll call requests? There being none, Chair will open up the floor to discussion on resolutions. Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding 519, which we just received a long presentation about, I agree there's a lot of emotions surrounding this current legislation. We received a report yesterday of an article of another tragic situation that occurred in New York State, where someone was released without bail because the judge decided, well, the legislation is going to allow them to be released without bail, so I'm just going to release them without bail. And that's all fine. It's all as far as discussion within, what a judge can do, what a judge can't do. But it really came down to the fact that if the judge had set bail and the person had a wad of cash in their pocket, they would have walked. So the emotional argument against eliminating bail comes down to our innate bias against people that don't have money. People that don't have money are bad. People that have money are good. That's just that's what our society says, and I feel that we shouldn't get sucked into that. Lawyers have to be dispassionate. It's tough for politicians to be that way, but we have to make decisions. We have to be that way whenever we can, at least. And I urge us to be that way now. If someone can't afford bail, they go to jail. If they can't afford bail, they don't go to jail until all the things get worked out. So I have no problem with eliminating bail because that's innately set against the people that don't have money. And I think we should start taking into consideration that everybody is innocent until proven guilty, and they're not guilty because they lack money, and they're not innocent because they have money. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on 519. Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very complicated resolution, and all due respect for Marcy and what she does and in the defense, because it is a two-sided coin. She's on the defense end. We all have choices in life that we make. If you have money or you don't have money, you make the choices. And as I've grown up, I've always paid for the consequences of the choices that I have made. And I have learned from some of my mistakes and this and that. From what I'm understanding on the whole bill, or what I'd like to get a point at, is we're not shutting down the bail reform, but I think it really needs to be reworked and reworded where, the judges have more of the option to set as per case, and in defense. Because really, what really concerns me is now, all right, so we say, well, let's reword this so they get charged with this crime and then we can keep them in there. Well, how's the defense not going to say, well, You know, in the olden days, they would have been charged with this, but now with the new bail reform, they're getting charged with this. Keep it. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword here. I think the resolution that was presented, that was worked up, 519, should go through so that New York State understands, and it's reworked so it works for everyone, for the defense, for the people with no money, with the people with money, and for our justice system here at the county and throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. What did I see Supervisor Beatty's hand?
Yes.
Supervisor Beatty?
Yes, thank you. It is a complex bill that will become law January 1st. I don't think it was well thought out by by Albany and the governor. His own attorney general says it's got some problems. So when your own attorney general comes out and says, well, there's problems with this, there are problems. Now, I think the safety of our neighbors should take precedent over just about anything else, other than taking care of seniors and those challenged. And with all due respect to Ms. Flores, she has her challenges in her job. We all do, okay? I don't think this is discriminatory. I think it's a bill that actually puts more of us in harm's way when you take the latitude of the judges' ability to set bail out of their hands. That to me is very scary. That's a position that I hope, because Warren County and numerous other counties, not just Warren County, across the state, are all saying this doesn't make sense. It needs to be reworked. And I hope the governor, and I hope Albany, and many of the downstate politicians who feel that this is good for upstate, will reconsider this bill and rework it so that it's advantageous and takes the dangerous aspect out of the equation and actually protects our residents, our neighbors, and so forth. So I'll be voting in favor of this resolution. Personally, I think it even needs more teeth. There's a lot of teeth in this resolution, but I think it needs even more, not less. So thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Straub.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my first reaction to seeing this resolution for the first time this morning when it was put on my desk was that there was no acknowledgement in the resolution of the need for bail and discovery reform. And I think we all know that there's a need for that. As Supervisor Loeb pointed out, a great example, and many others could have been given. In reading this, I also said to myself, this is very strong on emotional appeal and very light on putting forward the facts. So, you know, I was never comfortable with this. I thought that perhaps the legislation does need tweaking. But nowhere in this does it admit that there is a need for reform, for discovery and bail, and there is. So, and I thought Mrs. Flores did a great job showing the defense point of view, showing the inadequacies of this current resolution. I could perhaps support this resolution if it was more fair and balanced, but the way it's presented currently, it is not. Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to work with the administrator and Mr. Leggett on trying to bring my perspective to this resolution. As you know, I've worked in Health and Human Services for over 40 years, working with and advocating for low and fixed income individuals and families experiencing times of crisis and despair. I certainly read this proposed change in bail reform, probably more than any other issue that's come before me in the last couple of years. I often like to use analogies and compare to different types of situations. I work a lot with social services, and certainly there are individuals that commit fraud and abuse with social services benefits, maybe 1 or 2% of the population at any given time. As far as food stamps goes, that represents about 75 people, because about 3,700 families, households get SNAP benefits in any given month. To penalize or to change the social service laws because 2% of the individuals are experiencing a hardship wouldn't, in my opinion, be prudent. Certainly, I recognize that there's individuals that experience hardship with the current bail laws and the bail reform issues. I think that the majority, though, will benefit from further tweaking of the proposed legislation, and I would encourage, and I'm going to support the resolution 519. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Bramer.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to make my position known that I do support the bail reform. I think it's very important that we do not disadvantage our people with less financial resources and send them to jail just because they can't afford $100 bail. So I absolutely support that for low-level charges. I do think, though, that the legislation needs to be amended, that it went too far, and that there are certain crimes that have a dangerous aspect to them that maybe there should be an opportunity for the judge to take into consideration all of the factors and set bail as needed. However, given all of that, we do have to keep in mind that people are presumed innocent until they are convicted. So there's also that. It's a complicated situation, but I do think that it should go back to Albany, and there should be some additional discussion and some changes. But overall, I absolutely support the bail reform in its primary goal to take that weight off of people who do not have financial resources. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to speak to 519? Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll try to be brief. First off, I agree with Supervisor Strauch about the mention of the need for bail reform, and to also mention that Marcy, we're very fortunate to have her team, and the passion that she brings to this segment of our population that she deals with, and we are very fortunate. But my sense of this is that we're trying to influence Albany to try to make a change. Maybe what we could do is have someone suggest a modification to the resolution where we say something like, whereas we recognize the need for bail reform, but I'm going to support this because I think we need to do it in the strongest ways possible to try to influence Albany to make a change and to consider going through this. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Garrity.
Yeah, I support the resolution, and I think that is the whole intent of it, to get Albany to look at how they adapted these reforms and revisit them and listen to the other side of it. And, you know, if I was in trouble, I'd want Marcy on my side, and you know, she knows that. But it's time for Albany to do it the correct way, not put it in an 11th hour budget reform. And it wasn't done properly. And a lot of this stuff could have been brought back and forth through hearings. There was no hearings on this bail reform. But I do agree with bail reform. If you watch on a national level, they're doing it, and we should still do it.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to comment on 519? Supervisor Molino.
I echo what Supervisor just said. I'm just looking at it the way is, look at the problems we have with bail. How many more are we going to have when they not have to pay bail? I think more people will take advantage of that. So I have to support this.
You're welcome. Just one moment. Anyone else wishing to comment on 519? Supervisor Leggett?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd really like to thank County Administrator Moore for pulling this resolution together. To echo the Supervisor Strauss, it is very emotional, but I must point out it's very factual, and that's what impressed me on it. I'd like to thank Supervisors Bramer, Driscoll, Hogan, and McGowan who weighed in on this issue and gave feedback to Administrator Moore on language that's contained within this resolution. Their guidance was, as you see, quality guidance here. Public Defender Flores, we are very fortunate to have such a great advocate. She advocates very strongly on things that she believes in. And at the heart of this is, as we pledge every day that we come to this meeting here, justice for all. And from testimony that has come before the Criminal Justice Public Safety Committee, from the district attorney, from probation, and from the public defender's office, has been trying to weigh where is this justice. And as it has been presented to us, we see that the state is implementing a bail and discovery reform, and perhaps have not really included justice for the victims as much as there should be. And I think that is what we are advocating for on this. Let's look at both sides. I think we will agree that in any human-made system, it is imperfect, and people are going to suffer unnecessarily because of that, and that there are people in our judicial system that should not be going through what they're suffering through now because of those imperfections. We strive to make it better, and that's what this resolution on the floor is. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments. Now, without objection, Mr. Ryan, maybe I could ask you to say a few words here.
Thank you. Yes, to pick up from Supervisor Leggett, I just want to, in defense of the committee and the supervisors that helped to write this, this is factual, it's well thought out. The departments that have something to do with this, including the public defender, have been solicited during committee meetings for their opinions. They've been part of the process of drafting the resolution, and thank you to Sheriff York, Under Sheriff LaFar, Probation Director UC, County Attorney Cassane, Public Defender Flores, and District Attorney Carazone, who have all been involved in this process every step of the way, including providing comments for this resolution. To pick up, and thank you to Marcy, who is one of our best department heads and proved it. She's very, very good and does her job very well. But to pick up on just a couple of the points that she mentioned, as to maybe shed some light into what was in the minds of those who drafted this resolution on some of those issues. The vehicle and traffic law, that piece is in there because the danger in having these discovery rules pertain to those is that the DAs may not, they're going to prioritize where they do all this work on discovery, and having a violent crime or even a misdemeanor is in some cases going to be more of a priority than a VTL, a speeding ticket. So what happens when people realize that if you get a speeding ticket, all you got to do is go to court and get arraigned on it, and then the DA is not going to be able to meet the 15 days, and your attorney is going to be able to get it dropped. The highway is going to be like the Autobahn. That's why that's in there. 15 days in terms of the waiver, that is absolutely true, and we thank Marcy for being willing to work with the DA. But not every defense attorney is as good as Marcy, and not all of these cases are going to be handled by Marcy. And not all of these cases are going to have a waiver of that 15 days. That's going to be held over a DA's head in order to meet and potentially get a case dismissed if they didn't meet it. In terms of victims' homes, as Marcy stated, judges have discretion over whether that happens or not now. This law changes that. If it didn't, why is it in the law? Public employees, yes, it's true that OCA is doing these disclosures, That's not in the law. OCA has agreed to do those disclosures up until the point in time at which they did. We thought it was going to be probation departments that would do these disclosures. And the fact that those disclosures are being done by OCA doesn't relieve local taxpayer employees in the DA's office and in the sheriff's department of the additional duties that they will have to do. And the 2020 budget shows that in adding staff to both of those departments, paid for by property taxpayers, including Mr. Carney. The other piece is, yes, there are some crimes that have been enumerated in this resolution where you could charge it a different way. There are others that are not. You know, you call up and say, I'm going to bomb the county building, and you can't be held in jail for that, for making a terroristic threat, and then you actually do. That's what I'm worried about. You don't register as a sex offender, and then you go and commit a crime because you're not held in jail. You can't be held in jail for that. That's what I'm worried about. How many crime victims does it take to be victimized by this for it to merit the state sitting down and taking a look and see whether they did this right? I don't want to have one crime victim on my conscience because as public officials, we didn't do our duty in asking the state to take a closer look at this. Yes, there is a need for bail reform, but this is not it.
All right, without objection, I'll,
Just one more.
sure.
Or hopefully,
Go ahead,
maybe.
Supervisor Bramer,
I
sure.
would like to propose an amendment, an additional whereas clause at the end that says something like that whereas Warren County supports the efforts to design and implement bail reform and discovery reform to increase the fairness of the judicial system for all. And then the next would be resolved that we implore the state to look at it more closely. Or alternatively, delay implementation.
I'm just looking to where that should be in best place where that should be inserted. Any thoughts on
We could put the very first whereas paragraph, whereas the Board of
Yeah, I would
Supervisors
agree.
recognizes there is a need for some form of bail reform. We can wordsmith that.
Are you advancing that as an amendment, Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
We have an amendment to incorporate language to indicate that we understand the need for bail reform. However, then it goes into the resolution with, Andrea, is that a second? Ms. Hogan on a second. Discussion on the amendment. Supervisor McGowan.
No offense, Mr. Bramer, but I wouldn't water this down anything. So that's just, that's a plea of just, watering it down a little. No, I think we need to make the point because it needs to be addressed before the 1st of January, when this takes effect and costs the county a lot of money. So I say no on the amendment.
All right. Supervisor McDevitt.
I'm going to support Claudia in that effort. This is the wording of her amendment, I believe, recognizes the intent behind bail reform, but at the same time, we isolate, real world type situations in terms of circumstances, whether it be speeding on the highway, whether it be some of the more egregious forms of criminal conduct. But Claudia's recommendation, I think, is a good one, and I will support it.
All righty. Can I ask Supervisor Stroud?
I thought, what I said originally was that the resolution didn't address the fact that we did need bail and discovery reform. And so her amendment to this resolution recognizes the need. And I think that's very important. It was very important to me, as I stated originally, and I support Supervisor Bramer's amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment? There being none, let's do this with a show of hands. All those in favor of the amendment signify by raising your hand. Opposed? The amendment passes. The resolution will be considered as amended. Any further discussion on 519 as amended? There being none, I will close discussion on 519. Discussion on other resolutions presently before the board. Supervisor Bramer.
Okay. On 472, I don't know how much it matters. I do support the option agreement. But when I looked back through the records, I felt that the extension agreement had expired. So I just want to throw that out there, but I don't have any objection to 472. Thank you.
Any other discussion on 472? Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote, no on that, only because I still think there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered. I'm gonna vote no on that this time. It's just, not tight enough for me, so.
Further discussion on 472. Supervisor McGowan?
Yes, I have to agree with Doug, Mr. Beatty, Supervisor Beatty there. That property, does have a lot of issues, and I'd really like to know what the study says before I could make a decision on moving forward or not with this. So I'm going to vote against it.
Further discussion, Supervisor
Yes,
McDevitt?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote yes on 472. At the end of the day, the intent of Ed's program is job creation. Job creation is difficult. It's hard. It's getting in the trenches to try to make something happen and create an environment where people can stay in this geography. So at the end of the day, it's a vote of confidence for Ed, and I think that is what we ought to do.
Further discussion? Supervisor Stroud?
Yes, I am on the EDC board, and it's not an us against them. The EDC is for economic development for the county, and that's all they're trying to do. And so if this will help delineate what's needed to be done for cooperation between the county and the EDC so we can move forward, that's a good thing.
Further discussion on 472? There being none, I'll close discussion, debate on 472. Discussion on other resolutions? Supervisor Brammer.
Thanks. On 499, which is the establishing the new assigned fund balance account, I look forward to us being able to use that on important projects, and I just would ask that we start figuring out how we're going to manage that money, and are we going to set up a committee to talk about how those funds will be spent, and especially with things like the Halloween storm and all of the damage that just happened to our county infrastructure. I really think we need to prioritize our county projects with that money.
I think I can respond to that. I know Supervisor Ryan knows that there's a hurry up on that, and so the appropriate committee will be dealing with that hopefully very soon. The next committee meeting, perhaps. Any other discussion on resolutions? There being none, I will close discussion on resolutions. Vote on resolutions.
Resolution 461, making supplemental appropriations. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
I'm not sure what resolution you're on, but
Resolution 461, making supplemental appropriation.
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 462, amending Warren County budget. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 472, authorizing extension of option agreement with Economic Development Corporation. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
No.
Mr. McGowan?
No.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 488, amending table of organization. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 491, establishing capital project H391 Airport 2 new snowplows. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 493, authorizing appropriation of funds from Airport Repair and Projects Reserve Fund. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 495, establishing capital reserve fund A860, reserve SUNY Adirondack. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Recuse.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 496, establishing capital reserve fund A861, countryside rehabilitation. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 497, establishing insurance reserve fund A863. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 498, establishing employee benefit accrued liability reserve fund. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 499, establishing a 916 assigned fund balance. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 500, increasing reserve rehab county buildings. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 501, increasing reserve election equipment. Mr. Dickinson,
Yes.
Mr. Merlino,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. Sokol,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Garrity,
Yes.
Mr. Leggett,
Yes.
Mr. Diamond,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Logue,
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Chairman Conover.
Yes.
Resolution 503, authorizing appropriation of funds from general fund unappropriated surplus to the county attorney's budget. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 505, establishing capital project H392 Sunnyside Road. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde? Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 506, establishing capital project H393 Johnsburg Bridges. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde? Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 507, establishing capital project H394 Olmstedville Road. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 508, establishing capital project H395 Oxbow Hill and Moon Hill Road. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Beatty? Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 509, establishing capital project H396 East River Drive. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 510, authorizing appropriation of funds from the occupancy tax reserve to the tourism budget. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 511, increasing capital project H358 hazard mitigation grant program. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 512, authorizing appropriation of funds from general fund unappropriated surplus to the sheriff's budget. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 513, approving and adopting Warren County Sewer District assessment roll. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 514, adopting budget for fiscal year 2020. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde? Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 516, adopting salary and compensation plan for 2020. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan? Chairman-
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 519, imploring the state of New York to immediately amend or delay implementation of bail discovery and reform laws as amended. Mr. Dickinson?
Seems to be setting the pace here. We'll see how this goes. No.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
As amended, yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
No.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
And Resolution 520, refunding bond resolution dated November 15th, 2019. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes. Motion on the collective. Simpson on the motion, Supervisor Wild on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board at this time? There being no one, announcements? Announcements, Supervisor Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to announce the annual, or the fall, winter annual Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages meeting is going to be the 1st and 2nd. It's going to be at the Marriott in Lake George, and it should prove to be a good 2 days. So,
Very good.
they're all
That's,
on. Thank
did I see Supervisor Bramer? I saw your hand.
Thanks. Yes. Sorry. Hometown Holidays in downtown Glens Falls is the weekend of December 6th, and that's also the weekend of Chris Kindle Market. So it'll be a really hopping time that weekend. Get out to those places.
Very good. Anyone else? Supervisor Wild?
Chairman, thank you very briefly. I didn't think I was going to make through 27 yeses in the roll calls, but our clerk of the board did it 540 times. She went through this with only one slight stumble on Mr. Dickinson. So I wanted to commend her. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any announcements? Supervisor Garrity?
Yep. Christmas in Warrensburg is also the week of the 7th of December, so we welcome you all and come up and see our lights because we're adding to it.
Good. Very good. So are we, by the way. That's it's New Year for Supervisor Hogan.
Door is open. Get your skis and your snowboards out.
There you go. Any other announcements? Supervisor Merlino?
I don't have an announcement. I just have a comment. A couple of weeks ago, I was approached. Somebody asked me, can I help them get their driver's license renewed? And I say, because they didn't want to wait an hour or two at the. And I told them, from what I understand, it's gotten a lot better down here and everything is going well. You got to go down and stand in line. 3 days later, he called me and he apologized. He says, "Thank you. It only took me 15 minutes to get that done." So just a plug for our motor vehicle.
Very good. Chair, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Dickinson on. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
I have one comment. Don't forget Chris Kindlemart, bring your money.
Please.
Stay long. Please,
Mo-
yeah.
Motion to adjourn. Simpson, Garrity on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience.
The following program is underwritten by the generous support of Associates of Glens Falls and Loomis and Lipan Insurance. Since 1852, they have been assisting both businesses and individuals across the country secure the most comprehensive insurance products available. Associates of Glens Falls and Loomis and Lipan are one of New York's largest independently owned insurance agencies. Public affairs programming on Look TV is underwritten by the generous support of Pinnell's Restaurant, classic Italian-American food since 1922, And Stored Tech, technology solutions for computers, networks, and phone. Stored Tech, your technology, our passion.
1922, Babe Ruth debuts with the Yankees. WGY signs on air. Exterminator wins the Saratoga Cup, and Pennell's restaurant opens its doors for the very first time. For 5 generations, Pennell's has been preparing delicious Italian food, served in a comfortable, home-like setting where everyone is welcome. 90 years of authentic Italian recipes, 90 years of the freshest ingredients, and 90 years of the finest classic Italian dishes, all made daily by hand. Pennell's Italian Restaurant, a Saratoga dining tradition since 1922.
Firms deal only with prevention, the systems that block hackers and viruses. Stored Tech knows the root cause is actually good people doing bad things. So we offer a security training program which includes certifying all participants to show they understand the basics.
Technology solutions for computers, networks, and phones. Stored Tech, your technology, our passion.